Technology giant Samsung ends production of its latest top-model smartphone after continuing reports that they're unsafe. The Galaxy Note 7 has been hit by repeated problems with its batteries, with complaints that it catches fire. We'll be speaking to our correspondent in South Korea about the impact that this will have on its global brand. Also this lunchtime, MPs are debating the civil war in Syria with the focus on the humanitarian crisis in the rebel-held city of Aleppo. The killing of 16-year-old Bailey Gwynn in a fight over a biscuit. A report says his death was potentially avoidable. Why having to explain symptoms to a GP's receptionist is putting many patients off. And a competition to hold the Great Exhibition of the North is won by Newcastle and Gateshead.
In the south, helping heart patients stay out of hospital. The simple device pioneered in West Sussex that watches for palpitations. And here we don't go again. Another round of Southern rail strikes begins.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. Yesterday, we reported on the problems that were apparently again engulfing the South Korean smartphone firm Samsung over its Galaxy Note 7. Today, the company made it official. It's permanently stopping production of this latest model. Owners have been told to turn their devices off and are expected to be able to return the phones for a refund or an exchange. Problems with the Note 7 have dogged Samsung. It recalled 2.5 million devices last month after complaints of exploding batteries. It insisted that replacements were safe, but those phones too were reportedly catching fire. Here's our technology correspondent, Rory Kethlen-Jones.
It was the latest and best version of Samsung's giant hit phone. It won rave reviews, but then this happened.
I noticed smoke just pouring out of my pocket. Pulled the phone out of my pocket, threw it onto the ground where it continued to smoke.
That incident on a plane was just one among at least 5 where the Galaxy Note 7 caught fire. And these concerned not the original phones, but replacement devices sent out after the first overheating issues emerged. Now, Samsung has halted production and sales of the phone. Customers have been told to turn the devices off and return them. In London this morning, this man who'd bought previous versions of the Note was disappointed.
Well, I pre-ordered the Note 7 in mid-September, and I got it the day it came out. I was really excited, and I loved the phone, and I was told to send that back, so I got my replacement, and I was perfectly happy with it. I was really heartbroken to have to take my new phone in and hand it back.
24 hours ago, Samsung was only saying it was adjusting the production of this phone. Now it says it's permanently discontinuing it. What is clear is that the Note 7 isn't coming back, and the company's focus is switching to protecting its other phone brands. Samsung's other Galaxy phones, in particular the S7 Edge, have been hugely successful. The company must now reassure customers that it hasn't got a wider problem.
So you've got to understand that Samsung's an enormous business. Smartphones and devices account for about half its profits. And so it's going to survive this, there's no question about that. It's really looking at the sub-brand, the Galaxy brand, the Note brand, which I think are going to take the brunt of the damage here.
While this incident is the most serious so far, Samsung isn't alone in seeing smartphone batteries overheat.
The reason for the problem is that modern smartphones are immensely powerful computers. They use an awful lot of energy to make all those wonderful things work. That energy could be dangerous if it gets released quickly, and in certain circumstances that can happen. That is just the problem.
We're demanding more and more from our phones, but as Samsung has found to its cost, the one thing we prioritise above all others is that they are safe. Rory Kethlen-Jones, BBC News.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Stephen Evans, who's in South Korea. Stephen, we heard there the analysts saying that Samsung will survive this, but it is a disaster for the company.
Yeah, no question of that, Rita. It was time to take on Apple as Apple's released its new iPhone, particularly in China. Samsung thought it was being smart by getting its own phone, the Note 7, out a month before the iPhone 7. Obviously, it then lost a month with the first recall, and now it's lost, we don't know how long, because the whole thing is over. So Apple is not saying anything publicly, but clearly at its headquarters there will be some joy and relief.
Steve, thanks very much. Stephen Evans there. The worsening humanitarian crisis in the Syrian city of Aleppo has prompted MPs here to hold an emergency debate in the Commons this afternoon. Syrian government forces, backed by Russian warplanes, are involved in a fierce battle for control of the rebel-held east of the city. The UN Secretary-General, Ban Ki-moon, has described conditions there as worse than a slaughterhouse, with hundreds of civilians killed in the last few weeks alone. There are some distressing images in this report by Richard Galpin.
The aerial bombardment of the country by Russian and Syrian government warplanes is relentless. This video apparently showing an airstrike on a town south of Aleppo. The man filming says it's the 6th time they've been hit in recent days. And once again, it is the innocent paying the price. Her name is Aya. She says her home was attacked and she calls out for her father. Where is my daddy? That the conflict in Syria has created one of the worst humanitarian crises since the Second World War is beyond doubt. According to the United Nations, at least 300,000 people have been killed. 4.8 million have fled the country, becoming refugees, while almost 9 million others have fled their homes for safer parts of Syria. In total, that's more than half the entire population. Right now, much of the heaviest fighting is here in the northern city of Aleppo. In this, the rebel-held area, more than 250,000 people have been under siege for weeks. Hospitals and water supplies amongst the many targets systematically bombed by Russian and regime planes since the collapse of the tentative ceasefire last month. All this amounting to war crimes, according to many Western politicians, including the MP behind today's emergency debate in Parliament.
Russia is shredding international humanitarian law and the rules-based system. Russia is behaving towards the United Nations in the same way that Germany and Italy behaved towards the League of Nations in the 1930s. And the international community has to stand up against this.
Equating the Russian bombardment in Aleppo with Nazi atrocities is likely to provoke fury in Moscow, which already accuses Western powers of undermining the recent ceasefire. And at the moment, there's little sign of the Aleppo offensive being halted, regardless of what's said in Parliament today. Richard Galpin, BBC News.
Well, let's go over now to Westminster and to our assistant political editor, Norman Smith. And Norman, MPs have started debating this in the last few minutes. Have we had anything more than words of condemnation?
Well, there have been plenty of words of condemnation, and there have also been calls for action, military action, suggestions that Britain ought to form part of a no-fly zone over Aleppo to stop the bombing, that British jets could even launch retaliatory strikes against President Assad's forces if he continued with bombing, and even a suggestion that British destroyers in the Mediterranean ought to fire rockets to take out Assad's helicopters before they could drop barrel bombs. But the reality is that none of this is going to happen because there is no appetite whatsoever to go down the military route. And the reasons for that are the same as they've been pretty much since this conflict started, namely, without American leadership, no one is going to get involved militarily. America is distracted, even more so now because of the presidential election. Secondly, there is still, I think, the shadow of Iraq and a deep, deep wariness about getting involved in any conflict in the Middle East. And thirdly, there is a reluctance to square up to an increasingly confident and aggressive Russia, as we've already seen in the Crimea and Ukraine. And when you look at the diplomatic options, they don't seem much more hopeful either, because every time there's an attempt to try and bring out some progress through the UN, try and bring about a ceasefire, that seems to be vetoed by Russia, which I'm afraid means, although the condemnation, the rhetoric grows ever louder, the prospect of anything actually being done to stop the bombing comes no nearer.
Norman, thank you. A schoolboy fight over a biscuit that left a 16-year-old boy dead was potentially predictable and avoidable, according to a report out this morning. The report says other children at the school where Bailey Gwynn was fatally stabbed knew that one of the boys was carrying a knife. Our correspondent Ben Ando has sent this report.
Beneath a willow tree in the heart of the school garden is the memorial to Bailey Gwynn. Described as shy and gentle, in October last year he was fatally stabbed by a fellow pupil in a lunch break scuffle over a biscuit. His killer's now serving a 9-year sentence for culpable homicide. His trial heard he'd taken the knife to school on other occasions to seem tough, but no one had told a teacher. Had that been done, said today's report, Bailey's death could have been avoided.
The course of the conflict was fatally altered by the possession of a bladed weapon by one of these boys. This was potentially predictable and avoidable if those who knew that child A carried weapons in school had reported this to staff.
The report makes 21 recommendations, among them that parents and children should be encouraged to share information about pupils carrying weapons, that teachers in Scotland should be given greater powers to search students, and the Scottish Government should look at restrictions on internet weapon sales, after the killer told police he bought his knife on Amazon because there are no age checks online. But Bailey Gwynn and his killer were just 2 pupils among more than 1,000. And for the school, the questions aren't just about how this happened, but also how they managed the welfare of all those other pupils in the year since this tragedy and going forward.
We gave young people advice on how to cope, how to feel free to show their emotions, if you like. But similarly, if they hadn't been particularly affected, we told them they didn't need to pretend. The young ones could still go out and play at break time and could still laugh with their friends.
It certainly affected me. I think it affected everybody in school, whether it was his close mates or whether it was someone who just maybe seen him around in the corridor.
At Cults Academy, the memorial tree is to be joined by a stained glass window. For the wider education system, it's hoped the legacy of Bailey Gwynn's death will be greater clarity about how to keep school children safe by keeping knives out of schools. Ben Ando, BBC News, Aberdeen.
Patients are being put off from seeing their GP because of having to talk through their symptoms with the receptionist, according to a leading cancer charity. A survey by Cancer Research UK suggests that 4 in 10 people could be deterred from booking appointments because of questions about their symptoms from office staff. It says early diagnosis is crucial in cancer treatment and that people aren't obliged to give details. Robert Piggott reports.
GPs say their receptionists play a pivotal role in providing medical care, but many of their patients see receptionists as a barrier to going to the doctor. Campaigners say in the fight against cancer, any obstacle is a problem.
When cancer is diagnosed at an early stage, survival is much better. Many more people survive for a longer period of time when it's diagnosed at an early stage. And so it's very important to understand what might put people off going to see their GP. This isn't unlikely to be the whole explanation. In fact, it's almost certainly not the whole explanation, but it may possibly be playing into something around how comfortable people feel when they're going to talk to their GP about things.
Of 2,000 people questioned by Cancer Research UK, 40% said talking to receptionists about their symptoms put them off from going. 42% said difficulty getting a convenient time was a barrier, and 42% said they were discouraged by problems in seeing a particular doctor. Women especially objected to telling receptionists their symptoms.
Sometimes think they're the doctor themselves, and they try and fob you off, tell you to come back in a few days or go on again.
Now I think it's a confidence issue, so perhaps as an individual, if you don't feel confident sharing your own personal symptoms over the phone, I don't mind personally.
We need more nurses on reception dealing with the calls that are coming in. Maybe some retired nurses who don't want to do nursing anymore but can screen calls better.
GPs acknowledge that receptionists are not healthcare professionals and say patients do not have to discuss their symptoms with them. but GPs see 60 million more patients every year than they did 5 years ago and say information about patients helps them to cope.
As a locum GP, I go to a practice and I see 15 patients in 2.5 hours. So that's quite a lot of patients in a very short length of time. Yeah. And if the receptionist has put a little bit of information next to their name saying this is what the patient's coming in with, if I arrive a little bit early, I'll go through all my patients, see what they're coming in with and read their old notes. And that actually is a really big benefit to me, to doing a safer consultation with them.
NHS England says by directing people to the most suitable care, receptionists free GPs to spend more time with patients. It says booking appointments online allows patients to talk confidentially to doctors. Robert Piggott, BBC News.
The time is 1:15. Our top story this lunchtime. Samsung has stopped all production of its new Note 7 smartphone because of fears they could catch fire. And coming up, going solo in the Netherlands, Kate makes her first official visit abroad alone.
In South Today, will the sun keep shining? We'll have a full weather forecast. Also, the comic that's aimed at the hundreds of thousands with type 1 diabetes. And using art to see through the disability. A new exhibition of extraordinary portraits opens in Surrey.
Now, the city of Newcastle and the neighbouring town of Gateshead are to host 2018's Great Exhibition of the North. The £5 million festival will take place over 77 days on both sides of the River Tyne, showcasing culture and innovation across the north of England. Well, our arts correspondent Colin Patterson is in Newcastle for us now. Colin.
Hello from the Great North Museum, Hancock. This is going to be one of the main hubs of the exhibition in 2018. At the moment, its star attraction is this fella, a T-Rex known as Big Mike. He's going to be joined by new exhibits all about innovation in the North East. But Newcastle has held an event like this before, albeit 90 years ago.
1929, the North East Coast Exhibition, held in Newcastle and opened by the man who would become King Edward VIII. It was designed to celebrate local heavy industry. The 2018 Great Exhibition of the North will have rather different goals.
It's really an opportunity to showcase everything that's best and distinctive about the North. I'm a historian, so I love the past, and this exhibition has some roots in the past, but it's very much about the present and the future, and we've called it From Coal to Code. That's what it's about.
Newcastle Gateshead beat Sheffield, Blackpool and Bradford to the right to host the Great Exhibition of the North. The idea of ex-Chancellor George Osborne, part of his Northern Powerhouse scheme, with £5 million of government funding. And this is no ordinary exhibition. It will be held all over the streets of Newcastle and Gateshead, with 3 themed walking routes taking people to more than 40 venues and attractions. A 77-day exhibition of art, writing, innovation and design. Its theme, the blazing world, the fire of invention.
For me, this is showcasing the great things that are going on in the North already, but also building more legacy opportunities for those areas. So, you know, this is saying not just come and see what we've already got, but what new things can we bring in? What new attractions, what new events?
Although not everyone here thinks this is the best use of the money.
We've got too much spent on the arts up here. You know, I mean, it's beautiful, but it's already been done, hasn't it? Let's do something else.
I think there's a lot of other things that could spend £5 million on. You know, just look at the state of the street, man. Look, it's ridiculous.
Arts and cultures, yes, and the things that Capital of Culture had a few years ago. We get more of that, that'd be great.
This is Exhibition Park, where all the events took place in 1929, and one original building still survives. That was the Palace of the Arts. Now it's a brewery. And there's one thing the 2018 version will be trying to replicate: the 1920s turnout.
More than 4 million people visited that summer, an average of 30,000 a day. And there is a modern precedent. When Gateshead's Baltic Centre for Contemporary Art hosted the Turner Prize in 2011, 150,000 people came to see it. A record for the Art Prize, both in London and outside it. Those numbers will look small if one ambitious plan works out. Organisers hope to bring back one of Newcastle's greatest ever stars. Not Ant or Dec, but Robert Stephenson's rocket, built in the city in 1829.
Yes, if Stephenson's rocket, which is currently in the Science Museum in London, comes north, it will be a literal example of coals to Newcastle. In 1929, three of the most popular attractions, a Himalayan railway, there was a giant water slide, and a mechanical milking parlour. If two of those three come back, I think a lot of people will be very happy.
Colin, thank you. Colin Patterson there. The interim president of Haiti says Hurricane Matthew left destruction on an apocalyptic scale. Tens of thousands of people need urgent help, with some towns and villages simply wiped from the map. The country was already facing a public health crisis following an earthquake in 2010 and a cholera epidemic. Katrina Renton reports.
Much needed food is being brought into the south of Haiti. Many communities are becoming increasingly desperate. Power is still out, water and food scarce. The country was already in the grip of a cholera epidemic, and the warnings are stark. If aid does not reach people quickly, disease will spread, famine will become inevitable. The town of Jérémie was all but destroyed. Here, the United Nations children's charity UNICEF is trying to help. They say 66,000 houses in this town alone have been destroyed. Schools are being used as shelter. Among the hardest hit, the youngest. 15-year-old Levinson described what he saw.
The wind, all the coconut trees were destroyed. All sorts of trees fell down. The wind destroyed everyone's house.
Destuer is 13. He told how his family lost everything.
The tin roof flew away, roofs and tree branches flew away. Water started coming in, things were flying everywhere. The water surrounded us. That night it almost reached us. We were able to get out, but left all our things behind. We had to get them from a ditch.
And this is 7-year-old Ernica.
All my school books got ruined.
At a clinic in the small town of Marfrong, this father has just been told his baby has cholera. The UN says 750,000 people in the country need help, and this will cost around $120 million.
Crops were destroyed, which means the country will face a severe famine, as the southwestern peninsula is considered the breadbasket of Haiti, so the needs are urgent.
Hurricane Matthew may be long gone from Haiti, but the damage it has done remains. And if aid does not reach the most vulnerable soon, the situation threatens to get even worse. Katrina Renton, BBC News.
Staff on southern trains have begun a 72-hour strike as part of their long-running dispute over the role of conductors. Southern hopes to run 61% of its normal timetable, but it warns there'll be no services on some routes. The industrial action is taking place despite the RMT union advising its members to sign the rail company's new contracts. Our transport correspondent Richard Westcott reports.
It might be quicker to use that bike. Strike delays are becoming part of the commute for southern customers. You couldn't make it up, really. Not only is it the first of 14 days' worth of strike action, but customers are having to deal with severe disruption as well because of overrunning engineering works.
Very frustrating. Trying to get up to London, 8 months pregnant, so not really looking forward to having to probably stand all the way or not get there at all.
It's distressing, can't get a seat on most trains on normal days, and then when there's a strike, it's just doubly disrupted. And right now, I've left a bit later, I'm not sure when I'm going to get to work.
I've heard that people are just giving up and driving to Brighton.
Well, good luck, because there's been engineering works, and there's a strike, and you haven't allowed extra time.
No.
They're caught in the middle of a row over who does this. Closes the doors on the trains. The company wants drivers to take over the job from on-board conductors, saying it's common practice on other trains and frees them up to deal with customers. But the RMT says it's less safe and will eventually cost jobs. There's little end in sight.
We will talk to the RMT again if we actually feel that they're bringing something new to the table. We've spent 6 days at ACAS with them and they've not prepared to move on their position at all. So it's really difficult to negotiate with another party who don't understand compromise.
It's disruption caused by the company. They've created this strike. We're determined that they be looked after properly and there's a second safety critical role of a guard and conductor on board. If the company gets around the table and we can hammer out a deal, which we think is reasonable, then we can call off these strikes and get everyone back to work.
Southern's told its conductors to sign new contracts accepting changes to their role or potentially lose their job. The RMT unions told its members to sign the contracts but strike anyway. These people in Brighton will face another 13 days of action before Christmas. They now use the most unreliable train service in Britain. Richard Westcott, BBC News, Sussex.
The Duchess of Cambridge is in the Netherlands today, her first official solo visit abroad. She's been meeting the King and will later go to an art exhibition in The Hague. Well, our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell is there for us now. And Nicholas, what is the significance of her first foreign trip alone?
Well, as you say, the first solo foreign visit by the Duchess of Cambridge, a meeting with King Willem-Alexander of the Netherlands, and she's now at this art gallery viewing paintings loaned by the Royal Collection in London. But of course there is an added significance to everything to do with Europe. It's viewed through the prism of Brexit, the need for Britain to re-bolster bilateral relations with other European nations. So the Netherlands, an important export destination for the United Kingdom. The Duchess, a senior member of the British royal family. Now, they don't do politics, of course they don't, but the royals are part of Britain's diplomatic armoury, and a visit such as this, a meeting between the House of Windsor and the House of Orange, serves to underline the long and deep friendship between these two nations. A visit to this art gallery, well, it's to view art, of course it is, but it's also the art, if you like, of soft diplomacy, the promotion of Britain's interests by British royals, at which they are very practiced, and of which I think we will see rather more in Europe in the next few years.
Nick, thank you. Nicholas Witchell there. Hundreds of thousands of homeowners in flood risk areas should be doing more to protect their property. That's according to the Association of British Insurers, which says owners need to make their homes more flood-proof. But the insurers themselves are also facing criticism, as our environment analyst Roger Harrobin reports.
Floods brought misery to the north of England last winter, but who knows where the rising waters will strike next. This map from the Environment Agency shows all the areas that might be flooded. Hundreds of thousands of homes are potentially at risk. The answer is for the owners of those homes and businesses to future-proof their buildings by installing flood barriers, raising air bricks and lifting plug points. But the insurers say far too many people are ignoring the risks they face. The insurers in turn are criticised in a new report to government, saying they should make sure that properties which are flooded can't be inundated so easily again. Meanwhile, councils are blaming the government for not imposing tougher building standards. Avoiding floods has become a multiplayer blame game. Roger Harrobin, BBC News.
West Ham United have taken over the running of the Ladies' Club after being accused last week of discrimination by the ladies' former chairman, who claimed his team had been deprived of funding. Now West Ham say they will work in unison with the women. The vice-chairman of the club, Karen Brady, said the Premier League team are passionately committed to equality. Our sports correspondent Catherine Downs reports.
Coming in from the dark, West Ham ladies have spent the last few months training by the side of the road and wearing kit with ex-players' names crossed out on the back. Such was their frustration that Chairman Stephen Hunt lodged a formal complaint to the FA claiming such treatment amounted to discrimination. Today, he told me, the ladies' team is to be fully integrated into the men's club.
I'm delighted. It's a great step forward. The ladies have been working for 25 years towards this, and it all happened in a bit of a rush. From nowhere, all of a sudden there was a deal, and a deal was done.
And are you satisfied that West Ham aren't just paying lip service to this, that they are going to go through with it and give as much as they can to the ladies' team?
There's two questions in there, but I think that I'm satisfied they're going to give them a lot. They're going to fully fund, pay for everything they need. I don't think it's equality. I don't think it's as much as they could give, because that's an awful lot more than they'd be wanting to give. But that's next year's fight.
West Ham announced the agreement with the ladies' team last night. Vice Chairman Karen Brady said in a statement, "Today marks the next step in building the future of women's football at West Ham United. Not only does it secure the long-term future of the ladies' side, but also guarantees that current and future supporters, players and staff of the ladies' team will form an integral part of the club's bright future." Women's Super League and Continental Cup winners Manchester City have led the way in the women's game in recent years. They made their women's team part of the men's club 3 years ago. Now, with West Ham following suit, there are only 3 Premier League clubs still without an affiliated women's team: Hull, Southampton and Manchester United. Catherine Downs, BBC News.
Now, arise Sir Rod. Rod Stewart was knighted at Buckingham Palace today in recognition of his services to music and to charity. The singer, who's 71, said he'd had a wonderful life and a tremendous career thanks to the support of the great British public, and he promised he'd wear it well. Time for a look at the weather now. Here's Jay Wynn. Jay.
Thanks, Rita. We'll start off with some British territory, but it is overseas in Bermuda, where all eyes are looking towards the south, towards Tropical Storm Nicole. It is expected to intensify and drift its way north in the next couple of days, and it looks like it'll bring a pretty much direct hit to Bermuda. Not going to be the same sort of beast that Hurricane Matthew was, but still we're expecting some pretty heavy rain, big waves, and of course some very strong winds, but at least they're fairly geared up for that sort of thing in Bermuda. Back on our shores, a much quieter look to things, pretty quiet weather. There has been some sunshine so far today. It was a lovely start in the south of Wales, but there's been some mist and some fog. That's lingering, I suppose, to some degree across the Midlands, but further east, pretty grey skies earlier on, a little bit of rain in the air, and it is the northeast of the UK which is most at risk of further outbreaks of rain through the afternoon. A little bit drifts a little bit further west as well, but the further south you are, it's actually a pretty decent sort of afternoon. Most southern counties enjoying a bit of a breeze, yes, but some patchy cloud, good spells of sunshine, and it's dry, and it's dry too across most of Wales. But as you get up into northern England, the northeast in particular, that's the focal point for some wetter weather. Maybe 1 or 2 showers get across the Pennines. Eastern Scotland also seeing some outbreaks of rain. The odd shower in Northern Ireland, but a nice afternoon in the western side of Scotland. Then through this evening, that keen breeze continues to blow. Might push 1 or 2 showers further west, but generally speaking, it is the eastern side of Scotland, the eastern side of England, most at risk of some rain overnight, but with a lot more cloud generally, not as cold as recent nights, although we'll dip well into single figures, I suspect, in the western side of Scotland. Now, through tomorrow morning, a breezy one, that's for sure. A fair bit of cloud, a little bit of sunshine through tomorrow, but also some rain. But again, it's the eastern side of the UK most at risk of seeing some rain. The odd shower might drift its way along the English Channel as well. But in the breeze, temperatures, 12 to 15 degrees. It's going to feel a little bit on the cool side. And if anything, that breeze picks up towards the end of the week. Turning to more of a southeasterly direction through the day on Thursday. A lot of isobars in the chart. It will be quite a breezy day. And there'll be a fair bit of cloud as well on Thursday. Some outbreaks of rain, mainly in the northern half of the UK. It'll be on and off here. Further south, it's largely dry, but still breezy. And still those temperatures in that range of 12 to 13 or 14 degrees in the breeze. Again, a coolish sort of feel to things, particularly if you're underneath some rain. And then through Friday, this low is pushing its way towards the southwest of the UK. A lot of isobars in the chart. Again, it's going to be a breezy day. There will be some rain in the northern half of the UK, patchy rain. The rain in the south and west, I think it'll be a little bit more persistent, and then all of this swings its way north into the start of the weekend, so turning much more unsettled later this week and into the weekends. Rita.
Jay, thank you. Now, a reminder of our top story this lunchtime. Samsung has stopped all production of its new Note 7 smartphone because of fears they could catch fire. Well, that's all from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.